If you are looking for a no BS and honest conversation about white privilege and sexism in the startup funding scene, then this episode, my friends, is for you. Hi, everyone. I am so excited for our amazing special guest, the one, the only, Cahn of IFundWomen. Now, she is not only a powerhouse, she has helped so many women. And in the 5 years that she started IFundWomen, she has helped women raise over $135 million, which went on to create over 30,000 jobs for people around the world. So without further ado, Cahn, I'm so happy that you're here. Welcome to the podcast.
Thanks, Gloria. I'm so happy to be here with you.
And
haven't
congratulations.
seen you, like your face in like 2 years.
It's amazing to be here with you. I mean, obviously we can definitely get into like everything you're building. You just celebrated your 5-year anniversaries of your business. So congratulations.
Thank girl. We made it. It's a road, but we made it. I feel like we are, finally out of diapers and walking and we're still, are we in kindergarten or are we in first grade? I think we're in first grade now.
Honey, I think you've been there, done that, graduated, and then some. I mean, the impact you made.
God, no. I mean, thanks, but no, it doesn't feel like that. But it does feel great to make it to 5 years. When we started, it was when the Wing and the Riveter and Elevest, which is still crushing it, a lot of women founded brands for women by women brands, whether they were co-working or in finance, were started really in like late 2016. Yeah. And, not all of them are kind of sort of still around, to be honest, like, the brands are there, but the, Elevest is still crushing it, but the Riveter is a different kind of thing. And the Wing is owned by men now. So it's very different.
Yeah, that's a whole nother conversation.
It's a whole nother conversation, but I feel lucky. I feel very blessed that we're still here and that, really comes down to our team. So
100%
give them a shout out.
And one thing I want to just say, like, as a woman of color, as someone who is, first generation immigrant, I will say that IFundWomen, I feel like has this level of inclusion and diversity that I don't see as like, present in other female founded places. Not that they're not, but I do feel like you especially are fully committed to elevating women of color. And you actually have, IFundWomen of color as well. So talk to me a little bit about why, as a white woman, you made that conscious choice.
Thank you for asking me that, Gloria, because a lot of people don't ask me that. And I appreciate you saying, like, as a white woman, why? You would be so surprised how many people just tiptoe around like the fact that I am white. And like really white. And my name is Karen. It's like it's a disaster. But, so since I was a young child, have always been an activist for racial equity. And the reason for that is, I'll do like the very short origin story of my activism is I grew up in a very small, very homogenous, very white suburb of Boston. Boston is still a very sort of segregated, pretty racist city, quite frankly. Kind of getting a little better, but not so much. And back when I was, born and raised in the suburbs there, I mean, there was not one Black or brown person in my town. I was the diversity as a Jew, which is ridiculous, right? So, but then at home, my parents both were activists. They were marching on Washington, like in the 60s, like literal activists. And in my house, all my parents played was Black music and soul music and funk and Motown. And, that's what I grew up with, was in the home, like Black music and activism and being aware of the news. And then when I went on the school bus, it was like this small, like town where, people were just not open to strangers. I mean, it's so weird to even say the word strangers, but as like a white woman, but so that it just never felt normal to be part of this like white world when I knew out there were all of these other interesting people. So when I went away to college, I went to the University of Wisconsin-Madison. I actually majored in African-American studies. This was back in 1993-ish. Kind of before D and I were even letters that they put together. Like people weren't thinking about these things at all. And I was definitely like the only white kid in class, and like I didn't care. But it was incredible. I just learned about obviously the history, right?
Yeah.
Why things are the way they are now is directly related to the history of the world. And you can't get around it, right? So I've always been very passionate about equity for people of color in this country. I mean, definitely globally, but like I'm even having like a hard time knowing if I can solve the funding gap problem here in the United States, let alone like globally. So, talk to me in 10 or 20 years and we'll see where we're at. But yeah, so I just, it is not okay to me at all that my white privilege in that, and most white people still don't even know what that is. So white people, your white privilege, forget the word privilege, because I think that's like really effed with people. Like, because privilege you think of as like wealth. It's not what that's about. White privilege, white people, listen up, is literally about the color of your skin and the freedom that affords you, in that you can, go to school and people don't look at you differently. At work, your ideas are going to be heard more than people of color's ideas, especially Black and Latinx people, right? It's literally the privilege or the honor or it's privilege, but again, it's not wealth. It's privilege of having white skin. So I've always deeply understood this and deeply just hated it, and really just have built my career, frankly, around creating equity for specifically women of color, because it's just literally not fair what goes on. And I don't like things that aren't fair. So,
yeah, that's why I have you on the podcast, because you're so no BS about it. And, you're not shy about it. What you said about tiptoeing, I think the reason why we have the issues that we do, because people lump everyone in one umbrella, and there's such a nuance, right, between women-funded business and BIPOC and Black and Latinx. So talk to me a little bit about, because you're kind of in this point where you've helped thousands of entrepreneurs, white and not white. What are some of the nuances that you see, and what do you want people to understand about the funding gap, not only between men and women, but between like women of color?
Yes, you're asking like the best questions. I love this podcast already. Seriously, God bless you for being so real and like wanting to have a cool conversation. Okay, let me sort of like try not to take this back to 400 years ago, but really just talk about the here and now. So we all know that people of color in this country, whether they are East Asian Americans, South Asian Americans, Hispanic, Latinx. I mean, they're not a monolith. Women of color are obviously not a monolith. There are multiple different layers, people from all around the world, also people that were born here. And, there's immigrants, it's a whole melting pot, which is like the beautiful, wonderful, amazing part of this country, if that's your world. But when it comes to wealth and equity, the disparity is insane. And I'm not going to like lecture you about the numbers or even give them, because it's just, everyone knows them. So when we started IFundWomen, it was Sarah and Kate and I, 3 white women. Okay. We had started our first startup together. It failed. Everybody knows about it. Don't even need to go into it. And when we pivoted and we started IFundWomen, we actually did research on our customers this time, as opposed to the first failed startup. We were like, let's just build a software for, women creators, video creators, because everyone wants it. We actually did customer discovery and customer research, and it was very clear to us from the minute we literally got the URL before we launched that most of our customers were likely going to be women of color, predominantly Black women and Hispanic women, potentially. So because those were the 2 groups inside the US that were starting businesses the fastest.
Yes.
And the reason why women of color, particularly Black and Hispanic / Latino women, there's a difference. I say there's a difference. So I know you know that, but for anyone listening, there's a difference between Latina or Latinx and Hispanic, and the jury's out on which word people prefer because they identify as different things. So you got to be inclusive. And P.S. about the BIPOC thing, I hear from Black people all the time, they hate the acronym BIPOC. They're like, really? But it's fascinating. Race is, I think, the most fascinating subject. Let me stay on task, though, and on focus and talk about why we knew we needed to start IFundWomen. So when we started, IFundWomen of Color, pardon me. So when we started IFundWomen, Sarah, Kate, and I were doing our research, and we realized that most of our customers were going to be women of color. So they kind of looked at me and they're like, well, what do we do now? I'm like, well, we hire people at our company from engineering to product to coaching to marketing through every discipline who look like our customers. Period.
Yeah.
And, and they were like, that's logical because women are logical. And we did it. So our first hire, and it was not like we were like, okay, we need to go find, 60% Black people and 30%, Latinx people. We didn't obviously we weren't performative about it. We just knew that we needed to hire because if we wanted our company to succeed and make money, we needed to have people building products and services for our customers that have shared somewhat of their lived experience. Now, everyone's experiences are different, right? Everyone. Doesn't matter if it's a group of Black women, many of their experiences are going to be different. Their socioeconomic status is going to be different. Mm-hmm. That being said, there are commonalities, obviously, with women of the same race. And so we hired, long story long, we ended up hiring, and we still have, a highly majority minority company, head of engineering, product. So Olivia Owens was our first hire, literally was hire number one when we first started. Olivia. Oh yeah. She's a founding team member. I mean, she literally is. She's been there since the very beginning. Her mother, Deborah Owens, shout out Deborah, was part of our beta cohort when we were in stealth. Oh. So that's how I met Olivia, because Deborah, who is like a phenom. She's a wealth coach and she spent, I think, 20 years at Fidelity. She's really created her own wealth. And when she came to IFundWomen to beta with us, she was building an app called Wealthy You, which was for personal financial savings and paying down debt and all that kind of stuff. And that's what she still does. But we became friends. And I said to her, I'm like, okay, so we've got this thing that people want. And apparently there's a real funding gap because we have all these people coming to us. And I'm like, oh my God, I hope our platform doesn't break. It was so MVP-ish. We called her Frankenstein. She was built on a WordPress page with a crowdfunding plugin. And we had a Slack channel just for customer service. We made people's videos for them for free. Sarah and I made them in my house or at YouTube studios in New York, or we would it was so scotch taped together. So with our beta, we were like, ladies, she may break, but if you need funding, and you want to get a free video, come and we'll help you. We'll put this thing up for you and you can test it. We were very honest about it. And P.S. it didn't break. And the women who crowdfunded with us were a diverse group of women because, of course, we had 200 applications for 20 spots and we were making free everything for everybody. So we couldn't take more than 20. So we, of course, picked a very diverse group of women. And also because we were in beta. And when you beta, you want to test things out. We had hypotheses around how much easier it would be for white women to raise money versus women of color. Obviously, because of what I started off talking about. So it's actually a full circle moment already, right? White privilege. It's easier. It's been easier for me my whole life because I have white skin versus the Karen who's my same age, born in the same place, blah, 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 who is Black. Two equal Karens, different skin color. God, that name Karen is so bad. But, it's going to be easier for me fundamentally. So we tested it on our own platform and found the same thing, right? That the white women they had wealthier networks, period. And so when you think about it, what is crowdfunding? Crowdfunding is when you, the entrepreneur, go out and raise small increments of money from lots of people that you know to add up to just enough money to get your thing off the ground, your business off the ground, right? So when we crowdfunded for our MVP, we crowdfunded $30,000. It was the hardest thing I'd ever done It really was. So like the women who have come on to iFundWomen and raised 50,000, 100,000, 300,000, I like bowed down to them. That is not easy. So we knew in our beta that it was going to be harder for women of color founders to raise in crowdfunding because their networks were not as wealthy as the white women's networks. We saw that in the beta. So we started kind of talking with Olivia about, you know, iFundWomen of color was an idea that we had kind of from the beginning, but we sort of were like, okay, Olivia was like, don't other, you know, she was like, it was sort of before, it was before people woke up for sure. I mean, absolutely. And it was also during the time when, well, listen, Black people and people of color have always been, quote, othered. And that feels like shit, I'm sure. I don't know because I'm a white woman. I can't tell you how it feels. But basically, Olivia's point was like, let's keep going forward, keep building out the products and services. Let's, you know, we're building the coaching platform. We're, you know, building the brokered grants, all the other things that we have. Let's see if we can move the needle without creating a separate space. Because we just don't, we're like over being othered. And I got that completely. So 3 years, so 2017, 2018, 2019, our first 3 years of full funding volume. And that's our number one North Star KPI, key performance indicator. That's the number one thing we care about at the company is funding volume. So we were going along building coaching and doing all the other things, and people were crowdfunding, and we were up and to the right and rocket shipping and all the great things. And we looked at the first 3 years of funding, and unsurprisingly, the 70% of our customers who self-identified as women of color had raised 30% of the cumulative funding volume. And the 30% of non-women of color founders, only 22% of whom were white. The other 8%, they say they didn't want to tell us, so they could be anything, but we'll just assume they're white. 30% were raising 70%. And Olivia and I looked at each other. When before the pandemic, we sat next to each other in the office because we've always been like probably the closest collaborators at iFundWomen, like since the beginning. And I looked at her. I was like, dude, she's like, I know. So I was like, see you later. So she found herself an engineer and a product person, and she built iFundWomen of Color, and she launched it on stage at the Women's March in January of 2020. And in 1 year, we brought the cumulative funding volume over the past 4 years up to 51% women of color founders. And the reason, Gloria, is, well, and so two things. One, we're just getting started, and women of color are not a monolith. So like, we're not sitting here like being like, our work's done, yay for us, right? We realize that like, we're just getting started and we need to do so much more. And the large majority of those women were Black women, and that's great. But there's lots of other women of color, you know, and we want to be able to provide the same level of concentration and understanding and service, and in different languages. So that's why we're just getting started. But the reason I think this story is so important is because Olivia and I said this at our iFundWomen Entrepreneur of the Year in my speech the other night. I'll send you the video and you can like link it or something. But yeah. I said in my speech, and I say this all the time, like the reason I love telling the iFundWomen of Color story is not because it's like, yay us at all. It's because we're just regular people. Like, I am not a celebrity. Olivia's not a celebrity. Sarah and Kate aren't celebrities. You know, Maya Brooks, who's was our product manager and head of product at the time, Black woman, not a celebrity. Like, none of us are people who are celebrities. None of the 29 of us. Yet, as a team and as leaders, Olivia and I, when you're passionate about something and you really want to make a change, you can do it. You can do it. You don't have to be Oprah and Adele. That's what I said the other night, because that was like the latest duo. Yeah. I don't know if you saw Adele's concert or the thing with Oprah, but it was so awesome. Anyway, so you don't have to be Oprah and Adele to start a movement. You can be Karen and Olivia. And so, yeah, it's just way easier to do everything when you're white, including raise capital.
Yeah. Yeah. And I also think you touched upon something really interesting is you're not doing the whole white savior narrative. Like, look at what I've done for these people of color. It's all about regular, everyday people, mothers, single mothers, raising money and working probably twice or three times as hard, but still achieving that dream. They just need like a vessel of support and like coming from an intention. It's like, I see you, I hear you, and I'm not going to combine you in this bigger umbrella of just women because your experience is different. So I love that you're not doing this like white savior thing that I think a lot of honestly, a lot of other companies are doing with the whole like DEI, like, oh, we hired this one Black person for our marketing brochure.
Totally.
You know?
No, you're right. And I'm not going to defend that shit because you're not wrong. I think that, and thank you for saying that. I very much appreciate that because it's funny, for a long time, I didn't even really participate in IFundWomen of Color because, yes, I'm the founder of the company. Olivia is absolutely the creator and the GM of it and the brain behind it. Like all the programming, all of the everything is Olivia's doing. Like, because you can't do that if you don't know the unique challenges, right? So Olivia not only did she do tons of research to build the programming, but she also is a woman of color herself, and so is her team. So I don't think of myself as a white savior. I certainly don't behave that way. And this has been a passion for me to help create equity for Black and brown people. But I think the performative, caring about race that happened in 2020 with the pandemic and the murder of George Floyd is like such bullshit. And we all know it.
Yeah.
And, we'll see. Look, I am always hopeful, but I'm also, believe it or not, Gloria, I'm like actually still kind of naive and gullible. I am. There's one thing about myself that I have known and learned is that I sometimes, to my detriment, believe too much of the good in people. So I wouldn't have said what I just said. Probably 6 months ago, I would have been like, you know what? Let's give people a chance. Yes, it was a press release, and yes, they are doing good things. Like they're actually putting their money where their mouth is. But let's see. But here we are, ending 2021, and I can tell you that IFundWomen in 2020, because we had IFundWomen of Color already built and up, and we were already doing it. We were walking the walk before the pandemic even hit, before George Floyd was murdered. And so all the brands that were like, oh shit, we need to care about women and minority entrepreneurs now because the pandemic and everyone's starting a business because the women are getting kicked out. We're getting unemployed faster. That's the other thing. Like when you look at race, who were the first people to get laid off? Hispanic and Black women, right? Yeah. And then white women, and then men. And then, men of color. So it's just like, it's so infuriating, but let me land the plane a little bit here. One of the reasons why IFundWomen of Color works so well, there's two reasons. One is if you can't find it, you cannot fund it. And conversely, if you can find it, you can fund it, right? That's what we learned like right out the gate. We were like, oh my God, like we just like put up this thing. We put up a platform within a platform, right? Like not even like like a semi-pretty, like okay-ish marketing page on the front homepage. And we had an amazing partner who we still have, who definitely walks the walk. So I want to be clear that like, we have a couple of partners, and this isn't me like, I'm not going to shout that. Well, I don't need to shout them out. But what I will say is, the partners that we've had working with us on IFundWomen and IFundWomen of Color, two specific partners I'm thinking about that have consistently since 2019 been doing grants, coaching grants, doing everything they can. Like there are some brands out there that legit care. So not all of them. And they're the ones that actually are doing it more quietly. And we're doing it before. So we launched IFundWomen of Color with Caress, Unilever, who is a partner before the pandemic, before George Floyd, before any of that. They were in it with us from the build in 2019. So I'm happy to give them a little shout out, because you know what? Bless their hearts. Like, they're still consistently funding, consistently. Visa's another one. Yeah. But so if you can find it, you can fund it. That's what we were like, oh, wow. Discovery is such a problem on platforms. Nobody's search is perfect unless you're Google, right? So like, as we work to refine search on IFundWomen, and we're working to refine finding the search bar, which by the way is in the nav. It's a little search box, but you can't search by race necessarily, but you can search by keywords. So if you wanted to come to IFundWomen and find, East Asian women to fund, or South Asian women to fund, or queer women to fund, or, queer people to fund, pardon me, the list goes on for, marginalized communities, right? You can go in our main nav, and we have separate pages for people that live in those groups. So not just Black women. And the list goes on. So you can do it that way. You can also search by keywords. So if you search for like queer owned or queer, you will find the queer owned businesses if you want to support them. So it's just, I guess it's so funny, because what you asked was like, there's so much intention. And I sort of take it for granted within my own brain. Cause yes, it's completely with intention always. Like it's actually just second nature for some reason.
Yeah. It's not rocket science. I'll never forget. So I joined a mastermind group. And one of the first things I noticed about this coach was that he's so nice. And, I love being a part of his mastermind program, but I noticed there's not a single person of color on his website. And it's such a small detail. And he has people of color that he's mentored, right? And so I asked him that, and he's like, wow, thank you for noting that, because I definitely have people in my mastermind that are people of color. But I just think sometimes when you are so in that space and you start to like go into rooms where everyone looks like you, you don't even like think and question like what that might be like for someone who doesn't look like you. And I think since, we've had these conversations, he's actively like been, rejecting panels of like all white marketing bros, for example.
That's so great.
Yes. And he's like, I'm not going on this panel unless you have someone who is not a cis white male. Right. So it's not rocket science to do the little tweaks. And when people ask me like, why is it that your customer base is like 90% women of color? Like, I don't know why, but like people just don't find me. And it's like, look within yourself. Like, who are you surrounding yourself with? Right. Yes. You're a white woman and your name is Karen, yet you've built an entire platform for like over 50, 67, 70% women of color. So that's funny. It's not rocket science, right?
That is hilarious.
So now you've given us such gems for anyone that's listening. I mean, I know it's called the Small Business PR Podcast, but there are probably white men listening to this and white women, and just, take some notes. But I want you to tell the people who are actually like not in the leadership level, where they're just starting their business, they have a side hustle, they're juggling all these things, they're a single mom, and they think that the funding gap is just too far to reach, that there's no way they can get started. What kind of actionable tips do you have for the struggling business owner who's trying to do it all? What can you tell them? How can they get started?
Yeah, absolutely. So first of all, like, we are you, and we definitely see you. So, and you can do it, even though I think it feels insurmountable, and I'm running the business that's helping the businesses. So I understand how you feel. And so you're co-signed, not that you need my validation, but it is freaking hard. That being said, it is doable, and it's about, it really, truly, and, I don't want to make this a sales pitch in the slightest, but truly it is about, if you are starting a business or you want to start a business, maybe you have a 9-to-5 job you hate, but you can't quit it because you're the breadwinner and you're putting food on the table, but you really want to start this business that you're passionate about in your spare time, and hopefully see if it can grow into something that you do full time. I'm going to use that as the use case. Does that work for you, Gloria? Yeah. Do you think that's a good use case for your listeners?
100%.
Okay, great. Or if you're like a freelancer, a freelance creative, but you work these steady jobs and you're doing one thing, so it's call that your 9-to-5, but you have this other passion for like, something totally not related. Okay. That's the sort of the same thing. 'Cause it's all about time, right? It's how are you going to spend your time making money, because you need to make that extra money and you want to start this business, but it seems so daunting and it's expensive to start a business. That's all those things are true. And what I would say to you is come to IFundWomen and just start coming to the free workshops and just get your feet wet and learn what you need to. Like, we have a free e-course. Yes, it's a crowdfunding e-course. Yes, you have a course, all the courses. And, you know, Gloria, I can go on and on about you, but I'll do that later. So when you're getting started, you literally want to you want to learn. You want to do some research before you jump in that pool, because once you're in it, you're in it. Okay. So once you're in it, you're starting to rack up your credit card debt. So it's, you know, buying your URL, getting a website up, you know, getting, whether you're making bags and you need to, you know, make your prototype or your sample, or you're a technology, you know, you're building an app, you have to get or you're a programmer, whatever it is, you're starting to spend money building this thing. And you don't want to go into debt funding the earliest days of your startup, because frankly, most startups fail and that's fine. But failing going into debt is the worst. I mean, the worst. Take it from someone who did it. There's nothing worse than a failed startup where you have spent so much money and you're now like paying that debt off. Like, bad. And not like bad shaming people. Like, it's IHTM. Okay. So come to IFundWomen and learn about what it means to have a business, right? What you have to do to get one set up. And even before you set up a legitimate business, how you can test your hypothesis that everybody is going to want this electronic knitting needle that counts the stitches, right? You think that you want it, and you think that like you have people in your sewing circle want it, but will they pay for it? How much will they pay for it? And that's the beauty of crowdfunding, because you get to test all of these things: pricing, demand, you know, colors, whatever it is, features on the app. You get to test out whether people want this stuff, if they buy into it on your crowdfunding campaign, either through your rewards or buying your product or service or whatever it is, or being on your list for your beta or signing up for your newsletter, all these things that like you have to do to get your business going. You also have to start being like a mad dog, like content creator. And no one will tell you more about that than you. I'm not even going to begin. But like, you can't just like start a business and think that like, oh, it's Field of Dreams. I've put up my Instagram and I put up my website, and here are all my customers. Here are like all they come. That's like so not how it works. I think selling online looks so much easier than it actually is. Don't you think?
Yeah. Yeah. I'm exhausted.
Yeah. But like, didn't you, when you got into it, think it was going to be kind of easy?
I think people make it look easy, that the people who have been there before, but then you don't actually see the years of torment and you know, all the messages and all the tech failures. And I think now I understand why people are entrepreneurs, is because they're so passionate about their why that they're willing to get the hate message, that they're willing to give up on those vacations for their why. And I think that's why entrepreneurs are my people, because they're so committed to that purpose.
I love what you just said. You have a way with words, which is why you do what you do. Seriously. You too. Mic drop. Oh my God. I am such a rambler, but thank you. That's very sweet. Yeah. You know, not every entrepreneur has the luxury of having a why, though. So there is the rise of the necessity entrepreneurs, which has been happening for the last, 10 or so years, 10 to 20 years, to be honest. And then when COVID hit, necessity entrepreneurs were booming. And when I say booming, I'm not saying that in a glamorous way. It's because people needed to start a business. It was a necessity. Yeah. So it's not necessarily the passion was there for the business that they started. And in a lot of cases, these are sole proprietors, and it's business services, and it's what they knew how to do, maybe in their corporate world that they've been shoved out of, whether it's accounting or, being a lawyer or whatever it is. We've seen the rise of the necessity entrepreneur, and it's hard when you can't fit into the corporate structure, or not can't fit in, pardon me. when they've shoved you the fuck out.
Yeah.
Ooh, are we allowed to say that word on your podcast?
I love it. Let's just roll. I mean, I'm a necessity entrepreneur. I built my business after losing every single dollar from my consulting retainer.
I don't think I knew that.
No. So I came to your event and COVID hit. I lost 60 grand worth of upcoming projects. And in March of 2020, I made $0. I didn't know where my money was going to come from. And then I completely pivoted. I went from working with startup bros to now working with mostly women of color, business owners, and I found my calling, and that's why we're on this conversation here.
Gloria, I'm blown away. You should be honored, because that is a very, very, very difficult thing to come back from so quickly. I mean, think about that for a second. You did not have income in March of 2020. Is that what you just said?
Yeah, zero
income. That's really, really scary.
It is.
And, you're right. You are the epitome of a necessity entrepreneur. You needed to make money. So, I think the lucky thing, or, I guess it's luck, or I don't really know if I would call it luck, but the good thing, the bright side of it, is that you are extraordinarily talented in your domain, and your domain could be done on you could be a business owner. So you opened a boutique firm, right? So it's like, the pivot is easy to see. I'm sure it was hard AF to do, especially starting from no money, because you have
I recognize my privilege too. I think, as an Asian woman who has, more access than a lot of other people, like, English speaking, first language, had access to, higher education. So I'm fully aware of my privilege as well. But I think for the necessity entrepreneurs that you've really worked with as well, and I find women of color, I mean, really, they're single moms. They have, 3 kids. I mean, that's a whole another level of challenge and struggle.
Yes. I mean, not, so it's interesting because our members, yes, we have, I mean, I'm a single mom. We have lots of single moms. I actually, it's interesting because when we think about our audience, and again, we're still small. I mean, we've got 250,000 members. Half are founders and half are funders. So it's about 130,000 founders who are members of our community, which is small when you think about it. There are 13 million female founders in the US alone. So we're like just getting started. We need you. Actually.
Yes.
We need some PR.
I'm there, honey.
We need more. I don't know what we got you. But yeah, I mean, we have not reached the underserved, the truly underserved. I think the woman you just described is truly underserved. She's underbanked. We haven't reached her yet. And I don't truly know if we actually have the skill set yet in-house to really be able to help an underserved person. The women that we have, the women of color that we have excelled in their careers, we're all equal. I mean, they're all just like us. I feel like it's like celebrities are just like us from like Us Magazine. Did you ever read that? Like, I'm so old. So
yes.
You're probably like, what are you talking about? But like, if you strip away the race, if you literally just strip it away, okay, we're really all very similar at IFundWomen. Yeah. All of the customers, and I'm including myself. I'm like waving my hands for those people who can't see me. I'm like including myself in it. We're really all very similar. We are all, I would not say wealthy. I would not say economically like privileged.
You say resilient as fuck.
Resilient as fuck, but also educated. Like our audience is highly educated. Mm-hmm. I mean, we have PhDs, we've got masters, MBAs, we've got, so it's not, I want to be clear that like our audience is mostly women of color, and they are by and large, like highly educated, super savvy women. And that doesn't mean we don't want to help women who are less fortunate. It just means they haven't come to us yet. Mm-hmm. There's been a couple who have been, like Precious Williams, for example, came to us, and I didn't know this.
I'm
when
having
she
her on the
was
podcast
homeless.
too.
Oh my God. Oh,
Yes.
girl, get ready to get like so fired up. She's amazing. I didn't know this. What I knew about Precious was actually very little. I didn't dig into like who she was. She just became a coaching member. She was smart enough to get the coaching, because little did I know she had gone to Georgetown Law School. She went to somewhere amazing. Oh, she went to Spelman College. She got a full ride to Spelman.
Wow.
And she was a beaten, a child, an abused child from a broken home in Missouri. I mean, just like you would never think that her outcome was going to be full boat to Spelman College, and
Shark Tank.
Shark Tank. I mean, like, and homeless in the middle of that. So it's just everyone's story is so different. And I didn't know that about Precious, but now, and it's funny, I didn't know it until recently when I saw her giving a TED Talk. So it actually made me think, I'm like, wow, she was a real necessity entrepreneur, but I never knew it. Why didn't I know it? Because she's so educated, I guess, and just bought the coaching. I didn't know she was getting her coaching from like the shelter she was living in, the women's shelter in Brooklyn.
Wow.
I know.
It's amazing.
So,
yeah, I mean,
maybe we are reaching people. It's so hard to know.
Well, you do
know.
have all your free coaching, which I think is phenomenal. I know this because I did a workshop for you, and the standard is very high. It's very organized. There's no promotion. There's worksheets. There's actionable steps. And so I've given 2 now IFundWomen PR workshops. So if you actually go into ifundwomen.com, you can search like how to hack your own PR, and you'll find my workshop among others. But for the necessity entrepreneur, like, you've now helped like so many, like if you're just getting started, like what's some of the best advice you've heard about funding, and what's some of the worst advice that's out there about funding and starting a business?
The best advice I can tell people is to get help, get a coach, or, just talk to other entrepreneurs in the community as you're getting started. Don't keep your idea to yourself. No one is going to rip it off, and none of us are original. Everything is iterative. We didn't invent crowdfunding, period. So like, talk to people about your idea, solicit feedback, and take the feedback in, not personally, right? This is not about you as a person. This is about your business. You want to know if someone's going to want to buy into it. Do that before you start the business. Talk to as many people in your industry as possible. Do as much research on your competition as possible, on their pricing. How do they present in the world? How do they show up? How do they market? Research before you start your business. And then once you're ready, if you're like, I am doing it, I am ready, she ready, you come and you get involved with the community and you go to the workshops. Like at the minimum, there's the $9 a month workshop access plan at IFundWomen. So we've got a lot of free stuff, but if you want Gloria's podcast, if you want Gloria's classes that she has taught in the past, they were free on the day she taught them live. And now they're behind a paywall because we have to keep the lights on, right? We have to have the staff and the people to be able to do the coaching. So it's $9 a month, very affordable. And you can have access to, there's thousands of hours of learning and instruction. And it's not BS. It's not like, oh, it's easy. Just do these 3 steps and you'll have PR. It's actually like no BS. Here's how to do it. Here, it's formulaic, and it's like, it takes a while, and you're not going to get it right out the gate, and all the things. And I would also say to people, like, take steps. An overnight success takes 5 to 10 years. Know that going in. So set a goal for year 1 that maybe includes, all your market research, and getting your website up, or some sort of like a blog or something where you can start talking about what you're doing if you haven't already. Hopefully you already have done these things before you get to IFundWomen, because, if you're going to crowdfund, you have to have all the content, and you have to be legitimate, and you have to be a person who has been talking about this business for a while, or this idea or this passion, right? So I would say before you even get started with IFundWomen or get started with your business, you have to have been talking about this out in the world. So whether it's knitting needles, let's just keep knitting. Like if you were into knitting, everyone in your Insta, everyone in your Facebook, everyone in your whatever, your friend group, they'd be like, Karen's a crazy ass knitter. Like, don't bug her. She's knitting and watching, The Real Housewives. I don't knit or watch The Real Housewives, but I figured I'd just go with the Karen thing and just continue. I don't even know Karens that do that, but yeah. So like if Karen's talking about knitting 24/7 and it's all over her gram for like a year, and then, oh my gosh, she's starting like a yarn store. That makes sense. I know she's into it, right? So it's all about being legit. It's about building up content and talking about what your passion is and what you're doing well before you even think about monetizing it, also known as starting a business. So that's what I would say to people thinking about starting a business. If you're thinking about it, you better be doing it. And when I say doing it, it means talking about it, content, all the things.
Right. Because if you're not so committed to it, then why should I commit to your vision, right?
Well, you mean as a customer or as a person who's going to do contribute to the crowdfunding?
No, as a customer, I need to believe that you know your stuff and that you've been like devoting time and resources and energy to this because you believe in it so much.
Well, as a funder, absolutely. As a funder so if we're talking about getting funding and what's the best first step to getting funding, your best first step is crowdfunding. And the reason is because you're raising cash. You get that cash immediately when someone puts it in your campaign. You are not waiting for that working capital. It is debt-free. You do not have to pay it back.
Yep.
And so that's the first step in funding, and you're proving demand. But before you can even crowdfund, you have to be, again, having the website up, the Instagram, the Facebook, whatever it is, have been talking about this thing, have content ready to go, all that jazz.
So why don't you tell us, leave us with like a little burst of inspiration. Like, what do you want to leave our audiences with?
Burst of inspo. Okay. I mean, look, if, Gloria can come from making no money in March of 2020, which was when the pandemic hit, to being who she is now, who is a very, very important woman making lots of money in PR, you can do it too. Honestly, it's true. Like, you can do it. It seems hard. It is hard. Entrepreneurship is a hard fucking road. But if you are passionate about what you are doing and you love what you're doing, you can do it. Like, I promise you, you can do it. And we are going to be here to help you. You can do it. You can do it.
Thank you so much, Karen. Success is inevitable. And thank you for reminding us of that.
Yes, absolutely. Yes. Success is inevitable. That's